This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
Now, this video should probably be started with a caveat that I am not someone who doesn't think that there is real value to a real tube amp. I'm a fan of tube amps, and over the last sort of couple of years, I did go through a bit of a phase of what I would describe as slightly irrational obsession with maybe Mesa Boogie amps in particular. But I think I've noticed a trend, and I don't know if you're the same, of amps in decline. And as some of the signatures of this, I think you'd be able to see in a few different ways. One of them, for instance, might be that Mesa Boogie are no longer making amplifiers for the European market, or are not at the moment. Now that's partly due to a parts shortage, I think. But I think also we've seen companies like Two Rock sort of scale back production and accept what is, I guess, the case for the amp industry in general, that the expensive tube amp is becoming a little bit of a niche market. And I think maybe there's a few factors influencing that, including things like the rise of the plug-in, the continuing development of the digital kind of modeler, and things like, I guess, unconventional things like a Boss Waza Air, which realistically can do the job for most kind of home guitarists that a tube amp could do, and in some ways in a bit more of a more convenient way. But I saw this article from Matt Owen at Guitar World, and I thought it was kind of interesting to see the best-selling amplifiers of 2022, because what you'll see is that there's a little bit of a tendency to one sort of thing. So at number 20 we got the Boss Katana Mini. At number 19 we got the Kemper Profiler Head, which I think sort of an amplifier, sort of a bit unconventional. Number 18, we got a fairly classic Fender Blues Junior 3. Number 17, the relatively new Marshall Studio Vintage SV20. So a 20 watt amp there. I think the Blues Junior is fairly low wattage as well, right? Then number 16, the Orange Super Crush. Number 15, the Boss Katana 100 Mark II. Number 14, a Fender Mustang LT25. Number 13, the Fender Rumble 100. Number 12, okay, and this is, I think, probably one of the classic amps, the Fender 65 Reissue Deluxe Reverb. So deluxe reverb, we all heard of those. Number 11, another really classic amp, the Vox AC15C1. Number 10, the PRS Mark Tremonti MT15, which is interesting. Number 9, the Marshall DSL 40CR. Number 8, the Orange MT20 Micro Terror. Number 7, the Fender Rumble 40 version 3. Number 6, the Fender Tonemaster Deluxe Reverb. Number 5, the Yamaha THR30 Mark II. Number 4, the Orange Micro Dark. Number 3, the Yamaha THR10 II. Number 2, the Boss Katana 50. And number 1, the Positive Grid Spark 40. Now, what you'll notice is that out of those 20...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Like, nearly 75% of those of the best-selling amps are digital solutions. A huge amount of them are modelling amplifiers. Some of them are like the Orange Super Crush, which is like a solid state, right? Instead of being a tube amplifier. That is still a traditional amplifier, it's just solid state. But what we're seeing there is that a huge majority of the amps being sold don't have these things called tubes in them. There are still notable exceptions like the PRS Mark Tremonti MT15, the AC15, and the 65 reissue Deluxe Reverb. And I guess the Marshall DSL 40 probably does as well, right? But do you still count those kind of modelling amplifiers as an amplifier? I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that. When it comes to new amplifiers that have come out this year that feature, the list goes number 10, the Blackstar St. James EL34 combo, which I've actually seen an awful lot about. I've not seen one in person. I wonder if you're willing to share your thoughts on those, if you've got one. The Fender Pro Junior 4 SE, which the Pro Junior has been around for ages, hasn't it? A Dark Glass Electronics Exponent E500, not heard of that. Number 7, the Line 6 Catalyst 200, so a modelling amplifier. Number 6, the PRS Hendrix 20, which is surprising because that's relatively new, right? That's sold quite well, clearly. Number 5, the Magnatone Starlight. Number 4, the Line 6 Catalyst 100, one of them. Number 3, the Positive Grid Spark Mini. Number 2, the Line 6 Catalyst 60. So the Line 6 Catalyst had a good year, clearly, and has appeared on this list 3 times. And number 1, the Soldano Slow SLO Mini, which I think is solid state as well. So it doesn't seem like there's people necessarily generating new tube amps that have mass appeal, except for maybe that Blackstar and to some extent PRS, which I guess would be a sign that the boutique tube amplifier has really become a bit of a niche product, right? So I think Mesa Boogie came out with a new version of the California Tweed this year, didn't they? And there are lots of things from manufacturers like Rev. I'm surprised that Rev didn't come into that list. But let me know your thoughts on that. Do you think that's a sign that the amplifier is in decline? Or is it just like a little bit of a blip? I think the days of selling tons and tons of 100-watt tube amplifiers, to me, seems to be very much a thing of the past. But I would encourage people that have never tried a real amp that there is something to them. You know, things like the Mesa Boogie Lone Star I really loved. This Fender Pro Reverb. Even the Line 6 Catalyst 100, though, I've compared it in the room with, you know, real Fender Vibro Verbs and real Soldano SLOs and, you know, expensive, decent amps, the Diesel Einstein. It really does sound pretty good, and it's not one of these things where it's like, oh, that thing's obviously digital and cheap, and these things are obviously way better. The Line 6 Catalyst to me was very surprising, but again, I'm not sure that I hold that in the same sort of mind space as a real tube amp, you know, like a Mesa Boogie Electrodyne or a Fender Deluxe Reverb or a Vox AC15. Interesting, like the Vox AC30 didn't make that list. Now quite a loud, quite a big amp. But yeah, is the tube amp having a little bit of a tough time? I think there was also that tube shortage for a while that people talked about. I think that must have been affecting things slightly, but it seems like there's an abundance of digital or modelling based amplifiers which do a thing, but I'm not sure they do exactly the same thing as a really good tube amp. Is kind of my thought on that, but let me know your thought if that's different. Are you still rocking a tube amplifier, or have you had to pare that back? I'd like to know your thoughts. Also, I've noticed for me personally that trying to sell some amplifiers, they're hanging around for quite a long time, whereas there was a time during sort of lockdown where amplifier prices seem to be creeping up, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore for me at least. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we in a time of sort of amp decline, or do you think it's just a short little blip? Or is the rise of digital modeling and all this stuff really going to make a dent in this thing to the point where perhaps only the sort of tone creators really care about having a tube amp? You know, like if you're using a Kemper or a Quad Cortex, as an end user, you would hope that someone out there might have a real tube amp to generate these tones from, maybe, but do you care if you have one yourself, or are you happy with the digital kind of version of it? Another question, Amplitude asked me if I wanted to demo the Tone X. Let me know if you want me to try and do that for viewers. Leave a comment saying yes or no. I'll be interested to know your thoughts on that. Oh, and just to check this trend, I went back and looked at the 2016 chart for this, which was dominated by Fender, Mesa Boogie, Marshall and stuff. So it seems, and maybe it doesn't feel that way, but the takeover for digital has been relatively recent and relatively sudden. If you want this, by the way, Lenny has actually put up a landing page, by the way, if you wanted something that could keep you warm while you shred. It's one size fits all, and keeps me warm when it's cold. So it's also got a hood. So, alright.